Hi there, this is Sarah from Amateur Filmies, and today I'll be taking you through my top 10 guilty pleasure horror movies. So the movies on this list aren't very highly regarded, but they're ones that I really do enjoy. Instead of ranking them by which one's my favourite, I thought I would sort them by IMDb rating. I know that for horror movies especially, IMDb isn't the most accurate sort of measuring system for how good a film will be, but it's generally the one that Matt and I tend to go off. But in general, horror movies tend to get rated a bit more harshly than other genres. I should also mention that there's nothing on this list that exceeds the rating of 6. So number 10 has a rating of 5.7 with around 5,000 views, and that is Burial Ground. Burial Ground was one of my first forays into Italian horror of the 1970s and 80s, and it did not disappoint. Burial Ground starts off like a lot of Italian zombie films. A group of friends go to a remote location. When ancient zombies are awoken in a nearby plot, chaos descends on the group as the zombies close in on them. It doesn't matter how slow these zombies move or how many opportunities the characters have to get away, everyone meets their death in this film. Dumb character decisions aside, this film is memorable for many reasons. For example, the young child played in the film is portrayed by a 26-year-old man. And surprisingly, that's like the least disturbing thing about this film. And I have to mention that the special effects were superb. They were so beautifully done, and it was extremely gory like a good Italian horror should be. Overall, I would say Burial Ground is the perfect film to watch with friends, and it's most enjoyed when you don't take it very seriously. Number 9 has a rating of 5.3 with 112,000 votes, and that is House of Wax 2005. This is the kind of film I watched as a young teen and I absolutely loved. I didn't realise till much later in my life that it actually is not a highly regarded film. I think its biggest criticism is the fact that it shares its name with the classic House of Wax from 1953, yet the plots sort of barely resemble each other. House of Wax actually has more in common with the slasher film Tourist Trap than it does with a 1953 classic. It feels very much like a lot of other early 2000s slashers, but it has that unique twist because of the Wax Museum, plot. The whole concept of the Wax Museum gave it a really unique edge. There's a really good sequence within the film involving a movie theatre that is pretty intense. Overall, I don't think House of Wax deserves much of the hate it receives. I think it's a really decent slasher film. So number 8 has a rating of 5.3 with 8,000 votes, and that is The Resort. So I found this film on Netflix, and I'm never one to pass up a zombie film, but the title didn't really seem too promising, so I didn't have high hopes. I was very surprised at this film. It had a really unique concept and a very high production value. The setup to this film gives off mad Jurassic Park vibes. After a major zombie outbreak has been contained, tourists can pay to stay at a luxurious resort and hunt zombies in the wild for sport. The protagonist is forced to go to the resort as sort of therapy after the death of her dad to zombies. When a zombie rights group sabotages the resort's security systems, the tourists turn from hunters to hunted. The concept is pretty silly, but the film takes itself quite seriously, and usually I wouldn't like that, but it works in this film. Don't get me wrong, this film is not in the same league as 28 Days Later or Dawn of the Dead, but it is very enjoyable and very nerve-wracking to watch. So number 7 has a rating of 5.2 with 12,000 votes. And that is Cherry Falls. I watched this film as a child and I thought it was absolutely terrifying. Looking back, I don't think I should have been watching a film about a serial killer who hunts down virgins, but what are you gonna do? While it is pretty cheesy, I think it's a really good slasher film and there are some really brutal kill scenes. Before the killer's identity is revealed, they're really a genuinely scary presence on the screen. It's really enjoyable upon first watch to sort of figure out who the killer is as well. Once the killer is revealed though, we get some pretty hilarious chase scenes. And when I rewatched this with Matt, he could not stop laughing at how ridiculous it was. So number 6 has a rating of 5.1 with 3,000 votes, and that is Sadako vs Kayako. Matt and I were in Japan in 2016 with my family, and we went to the cinemas one day and thought we'd check out a movie. I actually couldn't believe it when I saw it being advertised, The Girl from the Ring versus The Girl from the Grudge. So immediately we bought tickets to the 4D experience. The entire concept of this film is absolutely bonkers, but it works so well. Sadako vs Kayako is nowhere near as well made as the other Ring or Grudge films, but it is so enjoyable to watch. And there were some sequences that were genuinely scary, as well as sequences that were sort of unintentionally funny as well. The film's basic premise is that 2 university students unknowingly curse themselves with the Ring videotape and they decide to bring the television into the Grudge house, so to double curse themselves and to get Sadako and Kayako to fight each other so they're no longer doomed. Something like that. So the plot is completely incoherent, but this film is amazing, I promise you. Please watch it. Number 5 has a rating of 5 with 17,000 votes, and that is 47 Meters Down Uncaged. It had been a while since I'd watched the first 47 Meters Down movie with Mandy Moore, but I remember that being extremely disappointing and sort of boring at times. So I really didn't have high hopes going into this movie. The concept of this film is a bunch of teenage girls go diving underwater, and they come across some blind sharks. They get trapped in the underwater cave system and they have to fight off these blind sharks. The biggest thing that bugged me about this film is that these girls are diving underwater and they have all this gear, but nothing covering their ears. Yet they can hear each other perfectly. But if you ignore some of the logistics of this film, it is really enjoyable to watch and the effects are really good as well. The film is intense all the way through and it's actually really good as far as shark movies go. Some of the character deaths in this film are pretty predictable and unimaginative, but they were really good to watch nonetheless. Number 4 has a rating of 4.7 with 1,000 views, and that is Killer Crocodile. Matt bought this as a blind buy from 88 Films. He liked the cover, so he decided to get it. And looking at the rating, we weren't expecting amazing things from it. We watched this with my entire family on Boxing Day last year, and I was really nervous for them to watch it given the unpredictability of Italian horror. They ended up really enjoying it and laughing at the dumb decisions some of the characters made. There's a really ridiculous scene where a girl is about to fall off a broken river jetty into the crocodile's mouth. And so someone tries to save her, but they do it in the most dumbest way possible, so they end up dying instead. And my family could not contain their laughter. Despite the weird subplot with the corrupt council members, it's actually a really fun crocodile movie. So number 3 has a rating of 4.5 with 20,000 votes, and that is Day of the Dead 2008. I actually watched this film before I watched the original from 1985 and I loved it. I rewatched it recently and I still actually enjoy it, and I think it holds up in terms of horror. It's important not to look at this film as a remake of Day of the Dead because the plot of both films are barely connected. The film is terrible in many ways and I can acknowledge this. There is a bub equivalent who is a vegetarian zombie, and they explain that because the guy was a vegetarian while he was alive, he's a non-violent zombie. I don't know how that works. Much of the character decisions and the dialogue is pretty laughable, but it's still a very palatable zombie movie. The scene set in the hospital is so chaotic and it still gives me anxiety watching it. I know some people laugh at the way that the zombie movements have been edited to make them look faster, but I actually think it adds to the charm and the horror of the film. If you're a purist, I would steer clear of this film, but if you love a good trashy zombie movie and you love mayhem and entertainment, I would definitely watch this one. Number 2 has a rating of 4.2 with 7,000 votes, and that is Urban Legends 3 Bloody Mary. It's funny that this is one of the lowest rated films on this list because it is directed by Mary Lambert, who directed the Pet Sematary movies. And I think those movies are classics, so I'm just wondering what went wrong in her career that she turned to this. Growing up, I was always terrified of the different urban legends stories that my sister used to tell me, and I remember being genuinely terrified by the first 2 urban legend films. Bloody Mary is one of the most terrifying legends there are, but it was really strange that the film series decided to take a supernatural turn because the first 2 were slasher films pretty much. The thing I love about this film is that there are many comical and creative kills within it, and upon rewatching it, it's not as creepy as I thought it was when I was a young teenager, but it's definitely still a very creepy watch. So first place on this list has a rating of 4 with 36,000 votes, and that is Halloween Resurrection. This is the Halloween film that cops the most flack. And for good reason. Any film featuring Tyra Banks is not promising, unless it's the movie Life Size, which is brilliant. Following on from the fantastic Halloween H2O, which sort of revitalized the film series for me, Halloween Resurrection manages to kill off Laurie Strode in the first 30 minutes of the film. And this kills off any character development she could have had. I really get why it's hated on. It is notoriously camp, and it ruins the atmosphere the previous films had spent so much time creating. But Matt and I recently watched all the Halloween films, and I personally found 4 and 5 to be extremely tedious and painful to get through. H2O and Resurrection felt like a breath of fresh air for the series in different ways. Halloween Resurrection is one of those films that captures the essence of early 2000s horror perfectly. And the addition of the horror game show plot was the perfect excuse to have Michael Myers brutalize some teenagers. And I don't know why, but it brings me so much joy to see Busta Rhymes spin kick Michael Myers in the head. If I'm looking for a horror film to lift my spirits, I will always go for Halloween Resurrection. So that concludes my list. Thank you very much for sticking with me, and please let me know in the comments what your favourite guilty pleasure horror movies are. Also, please let me know if you think I have terrible taste in movies. I won't get offended, I promise. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.